So thank you for joining Polycon UK webinar. Today we have Friederike Mengel from Essex, who is going to present the causal effect of inequality on attribution and social trust. And this work is joined with Andrea Albertazzi and Patrick Lown. Before I hand over to Friederike, let me remind you that these webinars take place every 2 weeks on Mondays, 3 p.m. UK time. In 2 weeks is our last presentation before Christmas break, and we will have Florian Fuss with us from LSE. As usually, you can find more information about the coming list of speakers and the past seminars on our website. Follow us on Twitter and sign up to our YouTube channel. The format is as follows. We have a 50-minute presentation followed by about 10-minute discussion and questions. We request all attendees to keep your microphones muted and cameras turned off, but please ask questions via chat, leave comments as well. We will collect all of those and organize in the Q&A session. Or if there are clarifying questions, we might interrupt the speaker and put it forward for clarification. After the Q&A, at the top of the hour, we will finish the official part of the seminar and we will stop recording. So the talk is recorded. But please, all are welcome to stay and chat informally after the talk. Friederike, the screen is yours.
Okay, super. Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me to this seminar series. It's a great pleasure to talk to you guys. And as Max has said, I'm going to talk about the causal effect of income inequality on attribution and social trust. And it's a joint work with my student, Andrea Albertazzi, who is on the job market this winter. And I recommend him very much, in case you have positions. And the other co-author is Patrick Lown, who is a political scientist at Essex. Okay. So I guess most of us are aware, or we're all aware, that despite some progress on eradicating or reducing poverty, there's still a very persistent income inequality in many countries in the world, and that includes many Western countries, including quite saliently the UK as well. So, for example, the share of total gross income that goes to the top 1% was estimated at around 15% in the UK a few years ago. Okay, in econ especially, we have studied a lot the economic and social consequences of such income inequality. Here are some outcomes that people have looked at: crime, poverty, obviously labor market imbalances, hardship, and so on. But in this paper, we're going to focus on psychological consequences of inequality. And in particular, we're going to focus on effects on attribution and social trust. We'll measure 3 outcomes. The first one is a belief in meritocracy, and that refers to a belief that economic status or wealth is earned as a result of hard work or ability. Okay. The second outcome we measure is blame, an inclination to blame others rather than external factors for one's outcomes, social outcomes. And the third measure we look at is social trust. In particular, we're interested in the belief that others' decisions are such that one receives what one deserves. So you're also going to see we're going to measure it slightly differently, at least in the lab, compared to sort of the standard social trust measure, because we are specifically interested in that aspect. Okay, all of these outcomes sort of are part of a bigger concept which refers to the belief in a just world, that the world is such that people get what they deserve, broadly. And these type of beliefs have received quite a lot of attention in psychology, especially because of their palliative function. So if I believe that economic status is the result of hard work or ability, I'm less troubled by inequalities that I observe around me. And so there is this sense that these beliefs are at the heart of this big question that I put here at the bottom, which is why can inequality be so socially and economically corrosive? Like I've mentioned on the first slide, a couple of really negative outcomes, but still at the same time remain largely unaddressed and people remain largely inactive about it. Okay. So these are outcomes. There are other reasons why these outcomes are important beyond this palliative function. And here is a list of some. Obviously, belief in meritocracy is going to affect my effort to improve my own economic situation. If I believe that, hard work and ability won't do anything, then, I'm going to put less effort. These outcomes, especially social trust, but also belief in meritocracy, has been linked to trust in institutions. There's quite a big literature showing that belief in meritocracy predicts support for welfare policies, which is intuitive. Similar reasons as I mentioned, and both blame and belief in meritocracy have been linked to political radicalization recently. Okay, because of this, these outcomes, especially belief in meritocracy, they have been measured sometimes in general social surveys. Actually, blame hasn't, at least we couldn't find it. And the way they are measured is like this. Belief in meritocracy is usually measured by agreement to a statement. And interestingly, for this outcome, the statements differ across surveys, even within the same sort of, type of survey, like the Pew survey. And there are statements like this. For example, agreement to the statement, most people who want to get ahead can make it if they're willing to work hard. Or hard work and determination are no guarantee for success for most people. That's obviously to be reverse coded. We're using a survey called Next Steps 8, which is a survey of young people in the UK. And here the statements are something like, if someone is not a success in life, it's usually their own fault. Or if you work hard at something, you'll usually succeed. The survey measure of social trust is much more established. I mean, it's been used in tons of surveys. And here the people are asked to agree, again, on a scale from 0 to 10 to the statement, most people in life can be trusted. Okay, if we then take these outcomes, I mean, we do something a little bit with them, but outcomes, and look at how they correlate with income and with inequality. We measure inequality by the Gini coefficient based on ONS data. Unfortunately, in the UK, at a very bad level of local disaggregation. But yeah, if we look at this, then we get a regression like this. And this is not unique to Next Steps 8. It has been shown, for example, in a paper by Patrick and co-authors for the US as well. Higher income, we have 3 income categories, medium, low, high. Higher income is associated with higher belief in meritocracy, and higher inequality with less belief in meritocracy. There are some subtleties here. I mean, you can sort of see this from the regression already, but I don't want to get too much into this. Okay, so we see this association of belief in meritocracy with both income and Gini coefficient, but we're also aware that none of this is causal, right? I mean, in fact, with income, it's very obvious that the causation could be exactly the other way around. Because I have high belief in meritocracy, I'm working hard, and that's why my income is high. There is all kinds of omitted variables and so on that could be playing a role. But this correlational association is relatively persistent, no matter where you look. Same for social trust. So we did this in Next Steps 8 and also in the European Value Survey, and we see again. We definitely see this association with income. With the Gini coefficient, we see this, we don't get statistical significance, but there seems to be something going on as well. Again, we have relatively bad inequality Gini coefficient data in the UK. Okay, so this is the what we see in general social surveys, and there is, these type of associations. This is what we did with Next Steps 8, but they pop up again and again in different papers in political science, in sociology, in other fields, but it's always correlational. So what we want to do in this paper is to identify a causal relationship, okay, between inequality and belief in meritocracy. And we're going to do so by using positional primes, okay? We also want to, apart from identifying a causal effect, we also want to distinguish between the effect of overall inequality or inequality by itself and own relative position, okay? Which none of these sort of correlational studies can do. We do so both using the standard survey measures that I just sort of talked about, as well as some novel lab tasks which we can incentivize. Okay, and yeah, so that's the third contribution. We believe this is the first study to study the causal effect of inequality on these outcomes using incentivized measures. Okay, I would go into the design if there are no urgent questions at this stage.
Yes, please.
I go, okay. Okay, good. So how did we design the lab experiment? Actually, the surveys too, the online experiments had a similar structure. So at the start of the experiment, participants answered a survey which had 8 items. We asked them their self-reported social class, their own, or if they were students in the lab, university students, we asked them their parents' annual gross income in a very coarse estimation. The monthly rent paid by their or their parents' household size, which grocery store they mostly shop in, if and where they go for holidays abroad, how much they or their parents' household spends on eating out, and the type of school they attended, comprehensive, grammar, private, or boarding school. Okay, and these are the last 3 items. In the UK, they are quite predictive of social class. In other countries, maybe not so much.
Sorry, I had this question earlier.
Yes.
This is all UK.
All our participants, both in the lab and in the online service, were restricted to be UK residents. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. So it's all UK. Yeah. And the reason that we do this is, well, there's several reasons, but yeah, that's all UK.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. Yeah.
It could also be international students, but in the UK?
No. So in the lab, we ask them to be their nationality to be UK.
Oh, okay.
So if they are just here for a couple of years, then not here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that was the income questionnaire that we asked at the beginning of the experiments. And then we sorted in 3 categories: high, medium, low income, based purely on the answer to question 2, the one about income. Okay. So we know we have them in 3 income categories. Then we prime them either upwards or downwards by showing them the overall inequality, and in some treatments also their relative position in one of 2 boroughs. So the downward prime is Chelsea and Kensington. Okay, Chelsea and Kensington has a mean income of £178,000 and is relatively unequal. We can't get Gini coefficients at that level, but the mean divided by median income is 4.74. And Norwich has a mean income of £26,000, and that's our upward prime. Okay, and yeah, mean divided by median is also much more equal. Okay, this is what it looks like. So if we know somebody is in our low income category, then we show them, we show them only one of these pictures, obviously. They're either prime downward or upward. So we might show them this picture here, which is Chelsea and Kensington. And we tell them, here is the income distribution of a borough in England, and based very broadly, based on what you have told us in the income questionnaire, the red person is where you would be. Okay, and so that's a downward prime. The upward prime places in Norwich, we can place this person here. Okay, this, of course, not every person in the lowest bracket can be placed here, but the way we have designed the bracket, on average, a person in that bracket can be placed there. Okay, and we emphasize it's a broad categorization. Okay, then for middle income, it looks like this. Obviously, they are a bit richer, so we can't place them in the same spot, but yeah, we can place them like this. And the rich guys, we cannot make them feel really poor, but at least we can tell them you're sort of average, right? Or not average, but not at the very top. Okay. So these graphs might look funny to economists. They looked funny to me. They did not look funny to Patrick, my political science co-author. And we pre-tested those. Okay, so I was going to show people quintiles of an income distribution, which Patrick did not understand and said nobody will understand, and he was entirely right. So yeah, we pre-tested this, and this is how, by showing these pictures, people understand broadly, what this means, how many people have how much money, are most people richer than average, and so on, these type of questions. And yeah, and by showing quintiles, people did not understand this. Okay, so this is these are our primes. Then we also have these 2 distributions without the red person. Okay, so we are not showing them the relative position, we're just showing them an income distribution in a borough in the UK. Okay, and here we also checked, we asked people which of these is more unequal, and most of them say this is a much more unequal distribution, and almost nobody says that this one is more unequal. Okay. Good. Then, so we prime them with one of these pictures, okay? And then we do our tasks where we elicit, belief in meritocracy, blame, and social trust, our outcomes. And we have two different sequences. So we either put the meritocracy task right after the prime or the blame task. And obviously, we want to, if we prime them with this picture and then 1 hour later, after doing 1 million tasks, we try to elicit something, we would suspect the prime will not have an effect anymore. So we need both orders to have this direct effect of the prime on both of these outcomes. For social trust, we didn't do a separate order because there's a reason we wanted to have this after the meritocracy task. So we pool both of those to get as much power as we can for social trust. And presumably maybe a sort of slightly attenuated or smaller effect size. Okay, and then these are all our treatments, both in online survey and in the lab. So we have these two sequences in the lab. Okay, we have the two types of prime, either only the distribution, which we call the inequality prime, or the relative prime, where the relative position, the red person is also shown. And in the online survey, we always only elicit one outcome. We don't do all of the outcomes. And we have these two types of primes. Okay. Randomization was pretty good. We have a few, comparisons which are significant, but there's really nothing to worry about. I want to point out our income categories. That was sort of by design. We hope to get them about balanced, and that's what we sort of managed. There's about 1/3 of people in each of our income categories. Okay, so I haven't told you yet how we measure belief in meritocracy and all of that. I'll do that every time before I talk about the results, because it might be a little bit boring otherwise. Okay, so I would talk now about belief in meritocracy, unless there are questions about these very broad design aspects. Okay. Okay, so belief in meritocracy, how do we measure it in the lab? Okay, so this is the novel task. So they do this task. I mean, it's several questions, but they have 3 components. So some questions, they look like a typical intelligence test or ability test. For example, like this, you have this sequence of patterns, and then the question is which picture comes next. And then they have to tick, one of these 4 options. And there are other questions which are similar. Effort task, always they had these matrices, binary matrices, and this is a 20 by 20 matrix, and they were asked how many 1 entries are in this matrix. Okay, and then they have to, get as close as possible to the truth. And then the luck component was they flip a coin, head or tail, and I forgot, if it lands on head, they get some money. Okay, so then they get an overall score, which is which is the sum of the scores in these 3 separate tasks: ability, effort, and luck. Okay, and then we sort them in groups of 10 in the lab randomly, and we elicit their belief about their overall rank. Okay, where do you think you're ranked? Then we reveal them the overall rank. We tell them, for example, out of these 10 people, you're ranked 7th. Okay, and we ask them about their belief about their rank in the subcomponents. Okay, how much do you think you were ranked in the ability task, effort task, and luck task? Okay, then we reveal the rank in ability, elicit their belief about rank in effort and luck, reveal the rank in luck, or whether they were lucky or not, and elicit the belief about rank in effort. Okay, and we always do this using this interval scoring rule. If you guys are interested in the details, I'm happy to talk about it. Okay, so how do we measure belief in meritocracy? Our main measure focuses on step 2. Okay, so at step 2, they know their overall rank. They know, for example, I'm 7th out of 10, and we ask them about their rank in these 3 components. Okay, we say they have high belief in meritocracy if their belief about their effort and ability rank is close to their overall rank. Yeah? So if they are 7th overall, and then they tell us, yeah, I think I was probably 7th in ability and maybe 8th in effort, then we'll say, they have high belief in meritocracy, this is close. If they tell us, oh, I was 1st in ability, 2nd in effort, and for some reason I'm only 7th, then we say it's low belief in meritocracy. Okay, so more precisely, we define this dummy. Belief in meritocracy is 1 if this average here, average guessed ability and effort rank the difference between this, and the overall rank, which they know, their true rank, is between the 25th and 75th percentile. Okay, so we split the sample. Those people who have a tighter association between believed ability and effort rank and true rank, they are the ones given the dummy 1, high belief in meritocracy, the others low belief in meritocracy. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so again, I mean, intuitively, what it means is high belief in meritocracy is people who believe their effort and ability explain their overall position well. Okay. And it should be noted they know the weight of the 3 components. Okay, so there's no doubt about how rank is determined in this task. So we're not thinking of belief in meritocracy measured in this way as an evaluation of this task, okay, because they know what's going on, but more as a general attitude or mental state. Okay, I get this information, I'm 7th in the task. How do I react to this? You know, instinctively, intuitively, not you know, thinking too much about the task. Okay, so what would we expect? So this is our measure. What would we expect? We would expect from the correlational evidence that being primed to a higher relative position should increase my belief in meritocracy. Okay, whereas being primed to high inequality should decrease my belief in meritocracy. Okay. So what do we see? This is the picture. So yes, the relative prime, those who get the high prime, substantially more likely to be in our high belief in meritocracy group, so to express high belief in meritocracy. Inequality prime doesn't seem to do much. Okay, I'll show you the same thing with regressions. Yeah, so this is the sort of the raw effect size, no controls here, and we see that those primed to a high relative position are 55% more likely to be classified as high belief in meritocracy. Okay, so pretty big effect size from this prime. Then we can put all kinds of controls from our income questionnaire or demographic controls, other type of stuff, risk aversion, we elicited and things like this. And that's pretty robust in terms of effect size. What we also see here is this a correlational effect. We see it for the high income category. Okay, so the richer people express more belief in meritocracy, but also those primed to a high position do. Okay, so that's a pretty strong effect. Does it persist? Remember, we have this sort of sequential structure. If I go to step 3, after you know the ability rank, it actually does persist. The effect size is very similar. Once we also tell them whether they were lucky or not, so now there's really not a lot of uncertainty left, then yeah, then the effect disappears. Okay. There's not much in terms of heterogeneity. If you're curious about gender, class, income, not too much. Okay, now you might think you're seeing this task for the first time, and you might think, I'm not sure this measures belief in meritocracy, so I'm trying to convince you that it does. And here are, you know, sort of 2 mechanisms that you know, two alternative stories that sort of, you know, people sometimes come up with. The first one is overconfidence. Okay, couldn't it be, you know, you sort of prime me to a high relative position, now I'm sort of becoming overconfident and I just express that I'm better, and I'm like, my ability and effort is better. Okay, so remember, this was our definition of belief in meritocracy. So what if we write down, if we define the dummy as being 1, if this statistic here is in the bottom 50th percentile, okay? So we're looking at the people who express a better ability and effort, okay? Who say that, you know, my ability and effort rank is generally better than my overall rank, okay? So those are the overconfident or confident people. If I redo my regression from the previous slide with this outcome, you see I get a pretty precise 0 across all these different specifications. So it's the same table as before, just this other outcome. And also the sign is wrong, right? The sign is wrong for this story. So it would mean that overconfident people, that those being primed to a high relative position display less confidence, which kind of is not a very intuitive story. Same thing with the anchoring, right? I mean, let's say you just told me I have a high relative position. Now I sort of believe in high things, okay? In, like, you know, in good things, okay? I have a good position in society, so I have a good rank somehow. Okay, so I've been anchored to this. I again read my regression. I just use rank now as endogenous variable. And I mean, now we don't get a very precise 0. It's not, nothing is statistically significant here. But we get this, but again, the coefficient is the wrong way around. So what this would tell me is that those being primed to a good position in society now, now tell me that they are worse, that their rank is worse. So yeah, so they are primed to a high rank, but then tell me I have a low rank. So again, a story that doesn't make too much sense. Okay, but then we also wanted to see, do we find the same thing with this standard survey measure? Okay, the sort of these questions. People can get ahead in life if they work hard, or if you're a failure, you only have to blame yourself. You haven't worked hard, and so on. Okay, so what we do then, we go online. We go to an online survey, and we use the same questionnaire, the same income questionnaire, and the same prime as in the lab. And then we use the same outcomes as in the next steps 8 survey. Okay, so now we don't use our novel task, but we use the old thing. Here are some comparisons, across these different samples. Because we use this survey of young people, we have both in next steps 8 and the lab relatively young age. Online then is older because we don't restrict by age here. And you see in terms of our income categories that we designed for the lab to have about an equal distribution in the lab, we see the online sample, they're a bit poorer. Okay. And in terms of measurement, next step 8 is neither causal nor incentivized. In the lab, we have both. Now we can't incentivize these questions, but we still have the causal interpretation because we're still using the primes we used in the lab. Okay. So this is what we find. Effect of relative position. Again, biggish effect size. So those primed to a high relative position are 34% more likely to express a high belief in meritocracy in this case. And again, it's pretty robust to putting all these controls in. Okay, the distribution only. So let's say we don't show them the relative position, but only the level of inequality. We get the effect, the direction of the effect that we would have conjectured, like a negative effect, but it's very, very small. It's not statistically significant. And by the way, we see the same in the lab. Okay, I haven't showed you in the lab yet. What happens with the distribution only, and also they see extremely small effect sizes. I'm always a bit nervous about this, but yeah, here's even the direction is even the wrong way around, extremely small. Okay. Okay, so no effect of inequality per se. Yes, very clear effect of relative position. And so, yeah, that was I don't know if it was disappointing for us. We had a weaker prior on inequality by itself, giving us something, but we were quite curious about this because we do see it in the surveys, right? Obviously in the surveys, this is not, also in the general surveys where we have only correlational evidence, this is not nicely identified, because it's not causal, but also because you can never really cleanly measure the effect of inequality by itself, because relative position is always there, right? Because yeah, you cannot, they're so intrinsically wed together that we can't really tease this out. So maybe there's actually nothing in terms of inequality by itself. Maybe it's all about relative position. And so we wanted to dig a bit deeper to see, if this is the case, if it's really all about relative position. Okay, so what we did then, we did a different online survey, about 300 people, and we used more primes, okay? Because maybe we thought that the primes that we use, maybe they're not different enough in terms of how unequal these two borrows are. So now we don't use actual borrows, but we use artificial borrows because we want to really make, the income distributions kind of crazily different in some cases. And then we want to ask, are these different primes associated with substantially different levels of inequality? If we just ask people, how unequal are these societies on a scale from 0 to 10? And then, of course, do these different levels of inequality induce different levels of belief in meritocracy when we prime people and so on. Okay, so these are our 12 different primes. This is the average perceived inequality on a scale from 0 to 10. Yeah, when we ask people how unequal is this borrowed on a scale from 0 to 10, and you see, we're using quite ridiculous pictures sometimes, but we're getting very big differences. So in some the most unequal society, people answer on average with 7.5 out of a scale to 10, out of a scale of 10 out of 10. And that's high, because I mean, we know to these questions, a lot of people answer 5 or 6, like, almost always. So getting a mean of 7.6 is really high. The lowest mean we have is 4 point something. And yeah, so big differences. But by the way, the two red ones, the two red diamonds are the ones that we had in the lab. So they are actually, they are different enough. But then, if you sort of, look at the belief in meritocracy that is expressed across these 12 different societies, when we, when we prime people by using these different distributions, yeah, there is not no difference. So yeah, so the different primes are associated with pretty different levels of inequality, but it does not seem to translate into differences in belief in meritocracy. Okay. So this leads to conclude from this part, belief in meritocracy, that yes, I mean, we do very robustly see a substantial causal effect of personal relative position on belief in meritocracy using these positional primes. And we see this both using our novel lab task and the standard survey measure. Okay, we could not find a direct causal link between inequality and belief in meritocracy, inequality by itself. And maybe, afterwards we thought it is actually intuitive because, if we see a society that's fully equal, it's unlikely to be meritocratic, right? Because, if everybody has the same, it doesn't seem possible to get ahead by providing effort. But of course, very strong differences are also unlikely to be due to differences in affordability. So maybe that this direct link is not there per se, at least not in this simple way. And so, yeah, maybe the correlational evidence from surveys either picks up something else, or it's just that it's so closely linked to relative position that that we can't identify it per se. Okay, that was belief in meritocracy. We have 2 more outcomes: blame and social trust. I will not talk about blame today for 2 reasons. A, explaining the task, how we measure it, is taking a little bit of time. And B, it's not a good reason probably, but we do not really find statistically significant effects, neither in the survey nor in the lab, on blame. We also do not see very precise zeros, so that's a little bit unfortunate. We did power analysis and everything, but yeah, we don't see too much on blame. So I'm going to jump into results on social trust, but we have a post-experimental, we have a discussion, of course, after this. So I'm happy to talk more about the blame. I have some slides at the end, and also how we measured it, if you're interested. Okay, good. But now I'm going to talk a little bit about social trust. It's more straightforward. Okay, so for social trust, we had people play a 3-player dictator game with a random dictator, if you know what that means. So what the pie that they could allocate was the sum of the scores from the merit task. Okay, so remember, to measure belief in meritocracy, they first did this task, ability, effort, luck component, and they got this overall score. So then we put them in groups of 3, and we sum their scores, and that's the pie that they have in the group of 3. And then the question is, each of them then determines how to allocate this pie across, across the 3 group members. But one of them, the random dictator, is then randomly selected, and that person's allocation is the valid one, is the one that's implemented. Okay. So they do this allocation, but we also ask them, how much do you think the others will share? Okay, so we ask them separately for both other players. They should not really make a difference. They know nothing about the other players. And then we take the average. So we ask them, how much do you believe others will share? They simply get 2 pounds for a correct guess here, so no interval scoring rule for to save time, mostly. Okay. Okay, so that's what we ask, and then we say social trust is their guess divided by the total pie. Okay, so if they tell me, I think the others will share 60%, then they have higher social trust than if they believe the others will share 40% of the total pie. Okay, the reason we measured it like this, as opposed to, let's say, a standard trust game, if you're familiar with this, is that we're interested in this component. No, in this aspect of social trust that sort of captures, how do others give me what I deserve, right? I mean, I have contributed to this. That's why also we use the pie from the merit task, right? The pie is all of our scores together. Do I get what do I deserve, and do others behave in this way? Okay, so that's the social aspect of this. There are some other ways to do this, and we can talk about it. Okay, but yeah, I'll go into social trust. By the way, of course, we can measure how pro-social they are as well. This was not, this was not an outcome that we were interested in ex ante, but we do find actually very strong effects of the prime on the pro-social behavior. We can talk about this also after the talk. Okay, but we're talking about social trust. And this is what we see. Again, the relative prime does it. So those prime to higher relative position have higher social trust, statistically highly significant as well. There's no statistically significant difference there. More inequality leads to less social trust, but it's not significant. This is the regression, 15% increase in social trust for those prime to a higher relative position. That's about 33% of a standard deviation. Okay. And again, we can, it's a very robust effect. Now here, we see a 6% decrease in social trust for those prime to high inequality, and now it's not, it sometimes is a little bit statistically significant. Okay, if we go to the online survey, let me do this first. In the online survey, we see similar effect sizes. Okay, 7% increase or 10% decrease, and this is the raw specification. We actually see here a bit more statistical significance. So I would not rule out that there is an effect of this pure inequality prime on social trust. Okay, it comes across very clearly with the relative position again. Heterogeneity, no difference by gender. If you're curious, the effect is stronger for both the lowest and the highest income category, but we can't say much about this. We don't know if it's because the prime is just a bit stronger for these categories, or if it's something fundamental. So it's not much we can say. Okay, and so I come to the conclusions. Okay, so what have we seen? We have seen across next step 8, the big survey, the lab experiment, and our online survey, that there doesn't seem to be a causal effect of inequality per se, distribution only, on belief in meritocracy, but there is this correlational effect in next step 8 of the Gini coefficient. Okay, the Gini coefficient, it cannot be seen as totally separate from relative position. So yeah. But we do see very clearly positive effect of own relative position on belief in meritocracy, and that comes out very clearly everywhere we look. In terms of social trust, we find everywhere a negative effect of inequality per se, with slightly marginal statistical significance sometimes, and we do see a positive effect of own relative position on social trust. Okay, so what do these things tell us? So I think we have, for the first time, maybe causally identified these non-negligible effects of inequality in personal relative position, using both incentivized as well as non-incentivized survey measures in different samples. So all in the UK. So this is evidence for this palliative and both palliative and corrosive effect of inequality. So those with a high relative position, they seem to display, or a high relative position seems to lead to higher belief in meritocracy and high social trust, okay, which which is palliative, because it makes people, if they observe inequality, makes them perceive inequality as just, and as due to a lack of ability or effort on those who are poor or have less, and so it's less likely for people to act on this. Low relative position, we observe rejection of meritocracy, so again causally, and low social trust, which which speaks to the corrosive impact of inequality. Okay, these things have a number of implications also for policy making, and one thing that I've been interested in for a while is is this idea of sort of how we design policies. And obviously policies are often designed by people in position of privilege, or coming from a high income background, and And obviously there's this question, what is a fair system and who is it fair for, and when are opportunities equal, right? And I think it affects a number of different, systems. For example, penalty systems for unemployed, right? I mean, these systems are fair if the unemployed person is, are potentially fair, or the logic of them is that they are fair. But this is, if the person in question is, from a high relative position, right? And their actions give their, belief in meritocracy, their social trust. If they act in a certain way, it would reveal certain things, right? And so, and then the system would incentivize them properly. But obviously it doesn't maybe incentivize people properly with a different, belief system. So I think this is important for us to think about, policies designed for, and how are their belief systems potentially different, and why, from from those who design the policy. Okay, I cut down a lot of things from the talk, and now I was a little bit too fast, but it's also not getting questions, I think. Yeah, but anyhow, I thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward now to getting your comments. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Very great. So we have a question in the chat, or a couple of questions in the chat. If you have other questions, please maybe signal this in the chat. Later we can just unmute ourselves. But meanwhile, Francesco, do you want to follow up on?
No, I mean, it was more of a comment. It's not something that really your paper is designed to address, which was, some people think that inequality should not be addressed to a certain extent, because they will argue addressing inequality means reducing growth, right? And to some extent, so would you rather have a bigger share of a smaller pie or not?
Yes.
And that, so, but I mean, this is not something, that requires a model of the economy in your head, which is not something that you can. It's just that at the beginning you mentioned different reasons for believing, why don't we fix inequality? And me, if you just think of the recent US elections, reducing inequality is being equated with socialism, right? And that has negative connotations. It's an economic that doesn't work. Clearly, at least in a lot of people's minds. So, but I asked that question at the very beginning. I think it became clear that this is not something that you could address, right?
No, sure. No, but it's a good point. And no, it's certainly true that, these sort of, sort of palliative effects are not, the only, reason why. I mean, there are also, other reasons, but some people might think there is, as you say, no need to address inequality, or, it's not, and yes, that's a good point. I'm not sure. I should look. It's a good point. I should look into some surveys. My gut feeling is, but I'm not sure, that if you ask, among politicians, or among the general population in general, how many people would agree to say, inequality is bad and we should address it, I would believe that a pretty big majority would say we should address it, but nothing is or very little is happening afterwards. But it's a good point. I should look at this.
Adam, do you want to follow up on your questions and specify clearly? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the very interesting talk. I had a question about your measure of blame. I know you had to skip over it because of time issues, but I find this perhaps the most interesting endeavor to find the effect on blame. Exactly. Yeah. And in a sense, it's kind of the flip side in belief in meritocracy, if you will, at least intuitively, that you would increase your brain if you decrease your belief in meritocracy, because they're kind of two sides of the same token. So I'd be interested to see how you, at least briefly, how you measured this.
No, thanks for this. So first of all, I should say we did look at a cross correlation across our three measures. It's obviously important. We do find that social trust and the belief in meritocracy are strongly positively correlated, or not strongly, but they are positively correlated. Sorry. belief in meritocracy and blame are positively related. Social trust and belief in meritocracy are unrelated. Okay. Okay. So now I can, and you're right. I mean, you could ask, you could have the opposite conjecture, right? I think you were saying you would conjecture that blame and belief in meritocracy should be negatively related, right? Because you're, but we do find positive and yeah, maybe I'll tell you first. I mean, I think what the intuition is, or I think by both directions one can think of. So one is, I mean, you could think of a positive relation if you think that that these are people who like to look for agency at some level, right? They sort of they believe that things happen for a reason and and for a purpose. And so if it's somebody else making the decisions, it's because that person has made bad decisions, right? It's not because of luck or random events. And the same thing for belief in meritocracy. If I'm having a good outcome or a bad outcome, it's because of my decisions and and my effort or ability, and not. So that is this sort of idea of sort of looking for agency, looking for reasons, and that would suggest a bit of correlation, which is also what we find. The other one is the one that you mentioned, I think, now that you say, it's about sort of looking for excuses maybe more, and then you would expect the negative.
Exactly. I was more thinking about measuring blame in a sense that you can blame it on precisely bad luck.
Yeah,
of course, that's not the way you measure it. So I'd be interested.
Yes, and now I'm going to show you how I measure it. Well, if you know the paper by Yeet Gordal, Josh Miller, and Aldo Rustichini in JPE, that's the task that we use. But if you don't know the paper, I'll show you the task. Yeah. So we have three types in this task. Okay, ABC. Person A chooses between a lottery, okay, and a safe outcome on behalf of person B, I think, on behalf of one of the other two guys, okay? So A chooses on behalf of the other two guys, and then the third person, C, they can choose, okay, sorry, I'm messing it up. A chooses on behalf of, let's say, B, okay, and then B can choose how to allocate a fixed pot of money, 15 pounds, between person A and person C, okay? And then the question is, we're having lots of lotteries like this. So obviously, you have some degree of risk aversion. You might prefer, this or this. I don't know. You prefer one of them, right? But afterwards, once you see the realization of the lottery, you see you have won 30 pounds, right? You shouldn't change your mind, right? The decision by A is no worse or no better because by chance die landed on 4 and you got the 30 pounds, right? So yeah, and that's what we're looking at. Okay, so how much do people blame, or do players B, let's say, blame player A for making, for the outcome of the die roll, okay, for the fact that this die landed on 4 and not 1, 2, or 3, okay. And we do this by looking at lots of different lotteries like this, and and then obviously they have different outcomes sometimes. Okay. And then they can express blame by punishing person A, by giving them less out of the fixed pot of money of the 15 pounds. So that's how we measure it.
Okay, that's clear. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before I ask mine? Okay. No, my kind of point of view here is that I don't know anything about this type of literature, so my question is much more general about the idea of this priming as being the correct test. So it's you say that you may go to that you went to this incentivization of those things, and I didn't quite got that, but my point is that if your prime is not really correct, then it doesn't say that there is no effect. It might be just that your prime, your picture that you told us may not be visually appealing or understandable.
Yeah. No, so absolutely. I mean, yes, in the case, this is the problem when you use a prime and then you get a null result, then yes, you don't know, is it the prime or is it that there fundamentally is no effect, right? So that's why we sort of try to sort of go with the inequality prime where we do find the null result, right? Yeah, that's why we sort of try to hammer on it more and more and more to see if we can, if we can get something. And the fact that after hammering a lot we don't see something makes us suggest maybe fundamentally there is not that much. But you're absolutely right. There is a good reason. So I think the prime in itself, we saw it, people do perceive very different degrees of inequality for these 12 different primes that we used. But there is a way to think that, a prime only showing a distribution, which is it's not very personal, right? So maybe it doesn't just have this effect on people as the relative position prime. That's more personal. That's about me. So you could see how this would, trigger more things. So yeah,
Well, I was thinking more of
we have to leave it there. We have to, it could be that thing that for looking at the effect of just distribution, just it's not.
I was thinking more of your last comment or slide in the conclusions when you talk about policies, because ultimately we are not interested in, I think, maybe I'm wrong, what is your position in the society and how you perceive the various outcomes, but what is the outcome of a policy and how you perceive those outcomes. It could be that you are kind of very rich. You lose in the policy because the policy, for example, does something about, for example, redistribution and equal educational chances, more opportunities,
right?
And yet you perceive it as more meritocratic, even if you lose out.
Okay, that is, of course, there's different reasons to support a policy, right? One is that you personally gain from it, right? The other one is that you perceive the policy itself as as meritocratic or fair in some way. Yes, and then of course all kinds of other reasons. So you're.
I was thinking about this.
So I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure what you're asking.
No, I'm
so just, you're.
I'm rambling. No, I was thinking more in the direction of assessing actually policies rather than your positions.
Yes, obviously that this is a totally. Not a totally different story, but it's a somewhat different story. To ask, whether specific policies are perceived as meritocratic and whether support for the policy depends on how, on how meritocratic you perceive the policy. Sure, but that's also true. But that doesn't sort of, that doesn't invalidate the other point, right? I think, yeah.
Do we have another question from Ed Hopkins? We have a raised hand.
Yes, I do. Hello, Friederike.
Hi, Ed.
Very interesting talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, this prime. I think it's an interesting way of looking at things. But of course, you have low relative and high relative position in any society, right? So even in a very equal society, people occupy low relative position, right? So. It's kind of orthogonal to inequality, or is it? Again, what I would think at the back of your mind, you've got an idea that, or most people do, that low relative position in an unequal society is stronger. Is what people really care about. But as it is, the prime is just about relative position.
No, we can't say. I absolutely agree with you that the interaction is really interesting about a relative position in a relatively equal society or in a relatively unequal society. And we can't say too much about it. And not with what we have done. We could in principle, but it certainly is true that, when you look at these sort of general surveys and you see these effects, that meshes these two things up, right? And we do we do see these interactions there with the Gini coefficient and income, right? And obviously, income is not exactly a relative position, but then of course, yeah. Yeah. So the only thing that we can say regarding this is that, I mean, if we believe, the null effect of our inequality prime, which, as we have discussed, it's always a bit of an issue. Then what we can say is that you need relative position to get these effects, right? You're not getting them from, people. Just inequality by itself doesn't, trigger these same reactions in people. It is relative position that sort of causes them to move one way or the other. Now, do they move more if the society is more unequal or less? Yeah, I would suspect that there is some interaction. Can't say too much about it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think the point is that relative concerns, I mean, I believe in relative concerns, I believe concerns are important, but
yes,
it's exactly how they interact with inequality, which is the bigger question.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, whether these effect sizes are bigger or large, I mean, it's hard to manipulate. I mean, if you show people their relative position, it's hard to manipulate inequality without moving their relative position, right? So, I mean, certainly with these type of primes, it's impossible, I would say. But even if you think about it, theoretically, it's not easy. And then of course, even if you can do it theoretically to convey it in a prime that it enters the, is because normally if you move one of these things quite a bit, you move the other thing, right? I mean, it's very hard to. I agree, it's interesting. I'm not sure how to identify it.
I'm not sure either, but anyway.
Yeah.
But thanks. Thanks.
No, thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Actually, I have a question. It's more of a curiosity. So you mentioned that, in the alternative way in which you measure overconfidence, instead of the belief in meritocracy, I was wondering if you have gender differences in that. It's more of a curiosity because I know you mentioned there are no differential effects based on gender, but I was curious if just there descriptively, if indeed you also see in your experiment kind of the usual overconfidence, gender differentials.
I didn't look at the overconfidence measure. I mean, it's in the regression, but I didn't pay attention to the coefficient. I mean, belief in meritocracy, usually women are attributed less belief in meritocracy. That comes out of the general surveys. I didn't check much in our experiment. In terms of the effect of the prime, we don't see a gender difference. But I didn't look at the levels.
Thanks. And also so you mentioned at the beginning that you have different ways of measuring income, but then you ended up mainly focusing on just kind of the main categories.
Yes.
So I was wondering about that is just basically because they're very correlated, so that would already capture a lot of the relative placement, or could there be maybe heterogeneous effects based on different types of kind of higher income, so higher educated, or
yes. So in terms of obviously the prime, we defined it on the income, so we can't change that now. But in terms of heterogeneous effect, very much if you look at social class, self-reported social class, those effects very much mirror the ones of income. So when I said somewhere that we have a bigger effect of the lower income and higher income group, it's also the working class and upper middle class that that has the highest effect sizes. We didn't look too much at the other variables like the grocery shopping and so on. I mean, one could construct an index from that as well, but we looked at social class, self-reported, and income.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we are at the top of the hour, so this is the end of the official part. Thank you very much again, Friederike, for a great talk, and the participants for questions and participation. We'll see each other in 2 weeks, but meanwhile, if you want to stay and have a chat post seminar, post workshop chat, then please do, and unmute yourself and join us.